Okay. Dave wants me to stand over here because that way he can get the PowerPoint slides as well. Well, this morning we are in Ruth 2, and last week we saw in chapter 1 that Elimelech failed to trust God during a famine that occurred in Judea, and so he moved his family from the promised land to one of the worst countries he could have gone to, morally speaking. What country was that? Moab. Now remember, Elimelech's forefather, Abraham, made the same mistake. During a famine in Israel, the promised land, he bailed out and went down to Egypt and got into a world of trouble. And Elimelech failed to learn from the mistake of Abraham. Now, you and I want to be aware of the things that other people do correctly and imitate them, and we want to be aware of the mistakes that other people make so we don't have to make the same mistakes. And as a result of disobedience or refusing to remain in the promised land, and Elimelech must have had a bad view of the promised land. So as a result of disobeying and refusing to live where God wanted him to do, divine discipline put Elimelech in a grave ahead of schedule. And his own two sons failed to learn from Dad's mistake. They did not return to Bethlehem. In fact, they advanced. They went further in disobedience than Dad did. Each of those fellows married a Moabite bride. And divine discipline sent them to the grave ahead of schedule as well. Now let's pause right there. We need to remember, folks, that the holiness of God is perilous, dangerous to a sinner who attempts to get close to God. We mustn't toy and play with the Lord. God has not hesitated on numerous occasions to strike a person dead who disobeys him. Now, Naomi, Elimelech's wife, is left a widow in a foreign land. It's hard for a woman to be a widow in Israel. It's harder for her to be one in a foreign country. And she's got no sons to support her. She did have sons. They're gone. And they didn't leave her any grandsons to help her later in life. And after 10 years in Moab, she hears the famine in Judea, Bethlehem, Israel is over, and she makes the decision to go home. Now, she's going to reverse her husband's bad decision. So she decides to return home, and one of her daughters-in-law, Ruth, decides to go with her. Naomi has done a commendable job of living out the truth of God before the watching eyes of Ruth. And Ruth is so impressed with what she sees in a Hebrew family, a Hebrew woman, that she has a very high esteem of the God of the Hebrews. And so Ruth commits to go with Naomi to Bethlehem and for the rest of her life to take care of her mother-in-law. How rare is that a woman loves passionately her mother-in-law? Well, I have to conclude that that is due to the unusual love that the mother-in-law showed her daughter-in-law. So now the story in chapter 2 is going to pass from the darkness of chapter 1 into the sunshine of chapter 2. But Naomi is so oppressed by the bitterness of providence that she fails to see the signs of life as they start to appear. Now, I want you to notice this passage from 1 Corinthians 7. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none. Now, that doesn't mean divorce your wife, leave your wife. It means we're getting close to the end. Human history is drawing to a close. And now, if you're married, you must live as though you don't have a wife. Now, what is he saying here? A single man doesn't have a wife. Christ should be preeminent in his life. Okay, now I want you men in Corinth who are married to live like you don't have a wife, so that Christ has no competition for your heart, your affection. Stop and think about that for a minute. Now let me ask you this. Take a single man. Because he's single, does that guarantee that Christ is first in his life? No, it should be. Why? He doesn't have a wife whom he dearly loves and maybe loves more than he loves the Lord. So even being single doesn't guarantee that Christ is first in a person's life. He has an easier time for Christ to be first because he didn't have a wife to compete for his love, for his love. And so Paul is saying, if you're married, I want you to be like those single men who should have Christ preeminent in their life. Now, I'm not really interested in verse 29, even though I took some time to go over that. What I'm really interested in is 30. And those who mourn as though they were not mourning. What does he mean? Something bad happens to you, you're devastated, you're crushed, you're in great pain. Don't let that become the major focus of your life. In a sense, get through it. Heal. Get over it. And go on. Sometimes when a tragedy strikes, that's it. That's it. A person now, that's the major factor in his life. And it's negative and bad. So now he's got a dark, gloomy cloud over his head the rest of his life. Our daughter took her life at age 24. Sue and I have never been so devastated and hurt in our life, but we refuse to let that be the major factor in our life and adversely affect us for the rest of our life. And those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing. Something good happens to you, wonderful. Enjoy it, make the most of it, but don't let that be the major focus of your life. So a tragedy shouldn't be the main thing in your life. Winning the Illinois State Lottery shouldn't be the major thing in your life. What should be? Christ. Focus on Him. But Naomi is right here. She is mourning. She's lost a husband. That's understandable that she would mourn. She's lost 2 sons. She has no grandsons. She left home full. She comes back home empty. There's plenty of bad things in her life. Don't let that be your focus. And Naomi's making a mistake here. Now, in chapter 2, God is the producer and director of the wonderful story that now begins to unfold. Ruth has a sterling reputation in Bethlehem. Everybody knows that she deeply loves her mother-in-law and that she left home, parents, friends, culture, her God, all for the sake of Naomi. And people just are holding her at the highest esteem. Who among us Hebrews loves a Hebrew like this Moabitess loves Naomi? Who among us would sacrifice so much for a father or a mother-in-law? Who would do as this young woman has done? So she has a wonderful reputation. And a person who is confident that his steps are planned by God can afford to take risk like Naomi did. And the greater the risk, the greater the reward. Confiding in the Lord, a believer can risk all that he might gain more. That's what Paul said in Philippians 3. I have lost everything that I might gain Christ. Now one day, Ruth has to go to work to support her poor mother-in-law. She doesn't expect Naomi to support her. Naomi's old. So she goes to work at a socially lowly esteemed job. What's going to be her job? Gleaning. Leviticus 23:22. When you reap the harvest of your land, now this is addressed to landowners, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleaning after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So this was a right that poor people had. You didn't have to go to a field and ask the landowner for permission to glean. So men were the reapers. They were in the first line. They would move through a field, chop, 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 leave the chopped stalks on the ground. Now the second line were women who bundle the stalks that the reapers have just cut. And then in the third line were the poor people. So the men moved first and cut stalks, then the women bundled the stalks, and then the poor would pick up whatever the women didn't bundle and didn't care, and they would attempt to scratch out a living from that. So she's going to be a gleaner in the field. But where will she work? In whose field? There are lots of fields. In whose field does she go? Heaven directs her sandals to step on the field of Boaz. Now, Boaz 6 times is called the man. You've heard the expression, oh, you're the man. Hey, you're the top man. Well, this guy must have been one of the top men in Bethlehem, probably the most eligible bachelor. And his name means son of strength, son of strength. The divine shepherd crosses the paths of Boaz and Ruth, and here their relationship begins. What state do I come from? Where? What state do I come from? Oh, not Kentucky. Oh, no. Why would I want to be from Kentucky?
We're from the city of confusion, apparently.
Have I been among you for 2 years and you don't know where I come from? Mississippi. And where does where does my wife come from?
South Carolina.
Oh, not South Carolina, North Carolina.
I get that all the time too.
So it's a whole story in itself how God led Sue 1,000 miles from North Carolina to go to school down in Mississippi. And it was all dependent upon her being awarded a scholarship, a music scholarship at Belhaven College. And the Lord saw to it that she won that. And if she hadn't won that, then she would have been educated up in North Carolina. And where would I be today? Oh, I wouldn't have Sweet Sue as my wife. I think she's the only girl in the world that ever had any interest in me. I'd be a monk today. Now, how great is the goodness that God has stored up for Boaz and for Ruth. Ruth, the Moabitess, will marry the son of Rahab. Can you believe that? Boaz came from Rahab. Who was she? She was that well-known prostitute in the city of Jericho. What a combination. A Moabitess, the most despised women in the world, and the son of Rahab, a prostitute. And from them will come Israel's greatest king, David, and from David will come an even greater son, the Messiah. So why is Ruth going to receive favor in the eyes of God's people? Why is she going to do that? Because she is going to be taking refuge beneath the wings of God. Now, why is that such a big deal? Psalm 57 and verse 1. Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me, F-O-R. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storm of destruction passes by. Now, when a person runs to God for help in times of need, God is now obligated to give that needy person the help required. God's reputation is now at stake. God is jealous, jealous, jealous to guard His honor, His namesake, His reputation. So when you rely on the Lord, now God is obligated to lend you the helping hand that you require. Lamentations 3:25, the Lord is good. I like that. The Lord is good to those who wait for Him. Waiting for what? Help. I'm in trouble. I've got a huge problem. I've got a big need. I need your assistance. And what's God going to do? You're trusting in me? Well, I'm just going to turn my back and walk away from you and let you perish. No, the Lord is good to those who wait for Him, to the soul who seeks Him. What are we seeking Him for? Seeking your help, seeking your guidance in my dilemma. Psalm 147. God's delight is not in the strength of the horse, nor His pleasure in the legs of a man, but the Lord takes pleasure in those who fear Him, in those who hope, depend on, rely on, anticipate His steadfast love. So that's one reason that Ruth is going to find favor in the sight of God, find favor in the sight of people. But there's another reason. Number two, Ruth's kindness to Naomi, which everybody is aware of. Proverbs 3, let not steadfast love, that means love on your part for some people, other people. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablets of your heart, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Okay, as we move into chapter 2, I want to sum up chapter 2 in one sentence. Here it is. God providentially led Ruth to Boaz's field in order to introduce them to one another. And our passage breaks down into these paragraphs. First two verses, Ruth is in Naomi's home. Middle paragraph, Ruth is in Boaz's field through 18, and then the chapter is going to end. She's back home under Naomi's roof in 19 through 23. Okay, so let's take that handout you've got. That's my translation. If you don't want to use my translation, open a Bible to Ruth chapter 2, and let's read through this. Let's follow this story that God has planned. So in verse 1 turns from Moab back to Bethlehem, from famine to harvest, from bitterness to blessing, from losses to gains. Verse 1. Now Naomi had an acquaintance of her husband, a prominent man of moral and material substance, from Elimelech's family, whose name was Boaz. Boaz, again, means son of strength. He is highly esteemed socially, spiritually, morally, and in matters of the military. He's related to Naomi through Elimelech. Now, he must be, scholars tell us, at least 35 years old, maybe 40 years old. In verse 2, Ruth takes the initiative and plans to support Naomi. And Ruth the Moabitess, let's stop right there. Now, why is she called here, since we already know that she is the Moabitess? Well, it's a reminder that she is not just an alien, she is a despised alien from Moab. The Hebrews and the Moabites do not like each other. They've got bad blood, bad history, bad feelings between them. And she has no protector. She doesn't have a father. She no longer has a husband. She doesn't even have an older brother to watch after her. She's got an old mother-in-law who can't defend her. She is at risk of racism. She is at risk for sexual assault. I'm in verse 2. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I want to go to the field that I may glean. Deuteronomy 24:19. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. That's Ruth. That the Lord may bless you in all the work of your hands. Now look at that last line. What's that saying? That sheaf that you left behind you, that's yours. Go back and get it. You lose it. Let the poor have it. that God may bless you. We see running throughout Scripture that it is to our advantage to be generous to needy people. Well, I thought it was to the advantage of needy people. It is. But it's probably more to our advantage that we be generous to other people. So leave that sheaf there, that the Lord may bless you in all the work of your hands. So Ruth says in verse 2, I want to go to the field that I may glean. That is, pick up the leftover grain left behind someone in whose sight I may obtain favor. And she, Naomi, replied to her, you may go, my daughter. Ruth, I just hate to let you out of the house. I just fear what's going to happen to you. You may be taken advantage of. Now we need to remember the period of time here. What period of time does Ruth occur? Say that again, Chuck. In the period of the judges, what were they like? What was this era like? One of the darkest, most evil in Jewish history. Are times today in America good? Look at all the crime.
Men are doing what they want.
That's right. People do what they want. It's just, we're living in a difficult time right now. I suspect the time of the judges was even worse than what we're in right now. So I think Naomi, when she walks out the door, I think Naomi just falls on her knees. God, go please today with my daughter-in-law and protect her. Lead her to the right field. Assign an angelic servant to guard her from sexual assault, from being taken advantage of. And so she says, you may go, my daughter. So unwittingly now, Ruth has an important appointment that day scheduled by her God. Verse 3, so she left and went and gleaned in a field behind the reapers. Now notice this next statement. It appeared that by chance she arbitrarily happened upon the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from Elimelech's family. Now, was it chance? No, but notice what it says. It appeared by chance. That is, to everybody, from the natural perspective, well, she had to go somewhere. And so it's just lucky for her that she went to the right field that day. That is a figure of speech called litotes. This denotes understatement. The exact opposite is meant from what is actually said. So what would the exact opposite be? It appeared that by chance she happened upon the portion of the field belonging to Boaz. It happened by divine decree that this is where she would end up. Now, why is that? Here's the reason. A man's steps are from the Lord. How then can a man understand his way? What's that mean? Because you are not in charge of you. He is. There will be sometimes twists and turns, ups and downs you didn't see coming. How many of you have had the experience of saying, I am going to do such and such, and to this day you never got around to it? Or just the opposite, I will never do that. And later, to your surprise, you went and did the very thing you swore up and down you wouldn't do. Have you ever had an experience like that? Why? Oh, we all have. That's because we are not in control of we. God is in control of us. All of our steps come from Him. Is that true?
Yes.
Did you choose your dad? Did you select the womb you came out of? Did you determine your gender? People are trying to do that today. No, God did. Did you decide what you look like, your level of intelligence? Did you decide what race, what country you'd be born in, what people you would come from, what time in history you would live? Those are huge decisions. We didn't make one of them. Who did? God had. God did. God, the Bible teaches us that before He created the universe, He knew you and me. And not only did he know us, he made a wonderful plan for our life. And God is now in the process of opening up, unfolding, and implementing that plan that he designed for us step by step. Yes.
He knew us does not mean we knew him, that we pre-existed.
Well, that's right. That's right. We didn't know him. We couldn't. We didn't exist. He knew us in advance. That's correct. That's a loaded statement. He knew us. Not only did he know us, he devised a wonderful plan for our life. Now that...
God looked to the fruits and saw everything that was going to be created before he created. You know the beginning from the end.
Yeah.
You know it because he saw it. He foresaw everything.
That's right.
The fruits. And he know you and me in the fruits. You know us, what we going to do, what we going to choose.
Yeah.
And everything, God knows everything about it because he foresaw it. Then he brought it into being.
That's right. That's right. I tell you, a lot of comfort. It's too much responsibility on me that my steps are decided by me. Too much responsibility. I don't have enough wisdom and good judgment to make most of the right decisions. I like knowing that the world today doesn't depend on me holding it up. That's too much for me. Let the Creator hold the world up and keep it on the right course so we don't get too close to the sun and burn up, or too far from the sun and freeze to death. Let God do that. And let God be in control of my steps. Let God be in control of your steps. He is. Now that the scene is set, the right thing happens. Boaz arrives. Then look, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem, and he greeted the reapers. Now, one commentator says, this man is saturated with God. Notice what he says. The next statement, he's going to be offering a prayer for his employees. May the Lord be with you to help you. In other words, here's a prayer from the lips of Boaz for his employees that God would give the workers that day strength, success, industry, and enjoyment. And they responded, may the Lord bless you. Oh, that prayer is going to be answered far more than Boaz could imagine. Why? Come into his field that day was a young woman who was going to win his heart and whom he would eventually wed someday. Now, Boaz had heard of Naomi's arrival home with a daughter-in-law, but he had not met her, but now he will. Verse 5. And Boaz, by the way, I was reading in a commentary from written by J. Vernon McGee. What a wonderful fella J. Vernon McGee was. He was just a noted pastor. And he said, the love of a man for a woman is the arrangement of God. I've never heard it put like that. It's the arrangement of God. That's true. Now, there's another pastor, and that is R. Clement Sauer. J. Vernon McGee was from California. This pastor, now where's this pastor from? Mississippi. Okay, good. I'm glad we got that down now. Now I want you to know what I got on the screen are the exact words, and I'm going to tell you the way in which I express these words. Here are the exact words I uttered to Sue just before I kissed her for the first time. Here's what I said. Sue, what is it in me that makes me feel this way toward you? I was flabbergasted. I had never felt this way for any female. Now, I was 22 at the time. I didn't know what was going on. I'm 77. Now, it's real clear to me. So what was it that made me feel this way toward this North Carolina girl? God was doing that. J. Vernon McGee was right. The love of a man for a woman is the arrangement of God. I'm still tickled over that word, arrangement. But that's what God does. He arranges things like that. So now, verse 5. And Boaz asked his foreman. Now, Boaz spots this young new woman in his field. Boaz asked the foreman, who was appointed over the reapers, to whom does this young woman belong? Now, what he means by that is, Who's her family? Or if married, who's her husband? Or if unmarried, does she have an older brother? In other words, link me up with somebody that I might know who would give me a good idea of who she is. So notice how I translate that. To whom does this young woman belong? I like the way Lurleen, the King James, expresses this question. Where is it? I think I've got it here somewhere. Oh, have I not got that? I guess I don't. I've got it somewhere. The King James says, whose damsel is this? Damsel. Now, I asked Amanda this morning, what does the word damsel mean? And she said, I don't know. I can remember it being used in an expression, a damsel in distress, but a damsel is a young woman. It's just an old English 17th century term. How many of you this past week have used the word damsel in your conversation? None of us do, see? But I like the way the King James puts it. Whose damsel is this? So again, he's searching for who's her family? Who's her husband? Who's her father? Who's her older brother? Connect me with somebody that I might know. Now, Boaz is going to notice her because, number one, she's a new worker. Now, this man comes out and checks on and prays for his employees. So here's a new employee. He's never seen her before, so of course she's going to catch his attention. And her ethnic traits are a bit different. She looks a bit different from the typical Hebrew. And her bearing and demeanor sort of set her apart and catches attention, and just her natural beauty. Now the foreman answers the question in verse 6. And the foreman appointed over the reapers replied and said, she is a young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the field of Moab. Now the expression, the field of Moab, to the Hebrews who knew their history, that was a very sad expression, the field of Moab. Why? Because when Moses led the Jews out of Egypt on the way to the promised land, in the field of Moab, the Moabite women seduced the Jewish men in sexual immorality. So that expression, the field of Moab, is a negative, painful reminder to the Hebrews. But the word Naomi. Now, Naomi links Ruth to what Boaz had previously heard of Ruth, who has this sterling reputation. In verse 7, the foreman continues his report on Ruth, and she requested permission. May I glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers? Remember, a poor person did not have to ask permission. It was the right given her by the law to pick up scraps in the field of harvest that nobody wanted. But by asking, she's showing respect. She's going to be submissive to authority.
Did the Moabs come from Lot and his daughters?
That's right. That's exactly right. They were the fruit of incest. That's correct. In verse 7, let's go back to verse 7. I'm in the middle of verse 7. With the word thus, the foreman now assesses Ruth's work that day. Thus she came and has persisted from early morning until even right now, resting in the shelter only briefly. She is a hard worker. She only took the shortest of rest breaks today. Oh, you go to Israel in the summertime, it is hot, 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 and you are thirsty. It just seems like all the time. Now, with a good meal, verse 8 states an outcome of the foreman's report. Boaz is smitten with admiration over this modest, fascinating widow, so he offers her some sound advice in verse 8. As a result, Boaz advised Ruth, have you not heard? Now he's sure that Ruth was told this by his other women workers. And notice what he calls her, my daughter. That suggests he's somewhat older than Ruth. Again, He must be at least 35, maybe 40. And scholars tell us that Ruth at this point is about 25. Now here's what I think Boaz is saying to Ruth. I'm sure you've heard this, and he's going to quote other women. Don't go glean in another field. Now, why would women employees say that to one another? Why would they say that? They're all working for Boaz. Now, if you want to, you can leave Boaz's field and go work in somebody else's field. But why would the women, the female employees of Boaz, admonish each other? Let's stay here in this field. Let's not go to another field. Why would they do that?
Trust him.
What?
Trust him.
They trust Boaz. He's a moral man. He won't permit any of the male employees to take advantage of any of the females. And he says at the end of verse 8, indeed, don't leave from this one. Instead, stay close to my women workers. Imagine the crime, the sexual abuse that took place during the period of the judges. It's just about Israel's darkest time. Now, the lack of grammatical link between verses 8 and 9 betray Boaz's eagerness in advising Ruth further. Keep your eyes on the field where they reap, and go follow behind them. Stay behind those women. Have not I ordered my men, my young men, not to touch you? Now, he must have said that out loud to all of his male employees so that all the women, including Ruth, heard that. Fellows, do not touch this young newcomer who is among us. Whenever you get thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from the water they draw. Now, I want to reiterate what I just said, how hot it is in Israel and how thirsty you get over there. Sue and I went to Israel one summer. We took our 2 high school boys with us. And when we got back home, I said to Jeff, what stands out to you the most of your trip to Israel? And here's what he said. Daddy, no matter where we went, I was thirsty all the time. Imagine, you go to the land of Jesus, and that's what you remember the most. Not where he died on the cross, not where he rose from the dead, but that you were thirsty all the time. But he's right about that. Unfortunately, now, in Israel, if you go there as a tourist, they got water fountains everywhere. Back then, they didn't have any water fountains. So, as a worker, you had to bring jars of water with you, or you'd never get through that day. And Boaz is saying, oh, now you don't need to bring the water. We got plenty of water here for our workers, and whenever you get thirsty, you have my permission to go and drink some of that water. What a blessing that is. Now, in verses 10 through 13 are the most important interchange between Boaz and Ruth. Verse 10, then she fell on her face and bowed toward the ground, exclaiming, why have I obtained favor in your eyes, so that you are concerned for me? Although in my case, I'm a foreigner. I'm not a native worker. I'm a foreign worker. It would seem to me that you should be showing favor to your female employees who are natives here. So why is she receiving this favor? Well, look at this. The sins of some people are conspicuous going before them to judgment. That is, some people's sins are so bad. You know what's going to happen when they stand before God in judgment? Oh, they're going to be condemned. Adolf Hitler. Do we have any doubt how judgment will go when Adolf Hitler stands before God? No. But the sins of others appear later. That last line means there are some people who do a lot of bad. We don't know it. We don't see it. But those sins are going to precede them and catch up with them at judgment, because God knows what you and I don't know. Now the exact opposite. So also good works are conspicuous. There are some people who do such wonderful good works, everybody knows about them, and we applaud them, and we know God's going to reward them. Even those good works that are not conspicuous cannot remain hidden. You do good, nobody knows it. God does. And at some point, the good you've done is going to become known. People will appreciate it. God will recompense you. So here's a young Moabitess who's done a lot of good, loving and taking care of and sacrificing everything for a poor Jewish mother-in-law. And now it has become known and people appreciate it. So this is one part of the answer to Ruth's question, why have you shown me this favor? Her question is answered in verse 11. But Boaz answered her in reply, it was fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law, specifically after your husband's death. You left your father and mother and land in your birth and came to a people whom you did not previously know. And I like this verse right here. What a wonderful verse this is. Jesus said, everyone who exalts himself, I want to be important, I want everybody to focus on me, will be put down. Now turn the corner on the other side. He who humbles himself like Ruth will be exalted. You know what Jesus is saying? Up is the way down. Down is the way up. The kingdom of God often works in the exact opposite manner that man's ways do. Now in verse 12, Boaz gives part 2 to his answer, where Ruth said, why are you favoring me? I pray that the Lord will reward you for your service. What service? I'm asking you, what service is he talking about here? Service to her mother-in-law. That's right, her service to her mother-in-law. God is not unjust so as to overlook your work and the love that you have shown for his name in serving the saints as you still do. You do good. Again, nobody may know the good that you do. Somebody does. He sees it. He appreciates it. He won't forget. He will recompense you for that. He goes on to say in verse 12, and I pray that your reward may be full from the Lord. Now what he means by full is this. Ruth, the fact that you left everything dear to you back in Moab, you have lost lots. Now I'm praying that God makes all your losses full, that he recompenses you. In fact, goes beyond recompensing you so that your gains far outweigh your losses. In verse 13, Ruth expresses appreciation. Then she responded, may I continue to find favor in your eyes. Now that's not directed toward him. That's a prayer toward God. For you have comforted me. You've allayed my fears. Oh, I was so apprehensive walking out the front door this morning. Coming, how am I going to be received? Am I going to end up on the right field? How are people going to treat me? Are they going to take advantage of me? Are they going to spit on me because I'm from Moab? Oh, you've allayed my fears. Indeed, you touch the heart of your maidservant. Now, touch. He just told his young men, don't touch this woman. And what does she say? Yet you touched me, but where you touched me is okay. In my heart, in my appreciation. Although I am not like one of your maidservants. Again, I'm a foreigner. All your other female employees are Hebrews. Now, Ruth's response to Boaz's kindness to her raises his esteem for her and prompts him to increase his kindness. Verse 14, and Boaz said to her at mealtime, please, now this is not an order, it's a request. Please join us so you can eat some lunch and dip your piece of bread in the sauce. Accordingly, she sat beside the reapers, not with the reapers, nearby them. She's not going to be forward, and she's certainly not going to sit by the boss. And he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied with it and had some left. Now, usually, Jews refuse to eat with Gentiles. This Jew invited this unusual, special Gentile to come and sit among him and his workers. Now, with a good meal in her stomach and encouragement of Boaz in her heart, the remaining afternoon work will be easier. And Ruth's return to work spurs Boaz's with a new order. Verse 15, when she arose to glean, Boaz instructed his workers. Now, he doesn't tell his foreman, tell this to the workers. He tells it to them to underscore his authority. Let her glean even among the sheaves and don't scold her. Now she's not to stay behind the workers. She's not to stay behind the women who bundle up. She has my permission to work among all the workers, and don't scold her. Boaz hadn't finished in verse 16. Rather, you must intentionally pull out some grain from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, so don't reprimand her. In other words, I want you to deliberately take out some of that wheat that you're going to put in bundles for me, the owner, and leave it for this young widow to pick up. Verse 17, so she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she pounded the grain off the stalks which she had gathered, and it was about 25 pounds of barley. Verse 18, the scene changes from field to home, from Boaz back to Naomi. Now she picked it up, that is the grain, the 25 pounds, and went into the city. And when her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, Ruth took out and gave her what she had left over from her abundant lunch. Boaz gave her cooked food. He gave her so much she couldn't eat it all. One commentator said Ruth had a Benjamin-sized portion. Now, what's a Benjamin-sized portion? When Joseph fed his 11 brothers, he gave Benjamin how much more food than all the rest? 5 times as much. So I think that commentator's right. Boaz gave Ruth a Benjamin-sized portion, so much she couldn't eat it. She took it home and fed her mother-in-law, who was grateful she didn't have to prepare dinner that night. It was already prepared for her. Let's see, where am I, folks? Am I in verse 18? Verse 19. All right. So from Ruth's joyful face and large amount of food, Naomi wants to know, where did you get this food? Who did you work for? Then her mother-in-law exclaimed, where did you glean today? Yes, indeed. Where did you work? She's saying, where on earth? Where in the world were you? Daughter, did you rob a grocery store? Is that what you did? May the man who shows such concern be divinely blessed. Be divinely blessed. Whoever has a generous spirit will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. What a motive this is for you and me to be generous with needy people. So, I'm in the middle of verse 19. So she told her mother-in-law, with whom she had worked, adding, the name of the man. Now, notice tension is building. Naomi wants to know, who is the man's name who was so kind to you? And the name is going to be given as the last word in verse 19. The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz. Oh, a thrill pierces Naomi's heart on hearing the familiar name of Boaz. Verse 20, as a result, Naomi exclaimed to her daughter-in-law, may he, Boaz, be blessed by the Lord, who, the Lord, does not withhold his loyal love from the living and the dead. God is loving toward the living. He's taking care of you and me as widows. He gave us a safe trip back from Moab here. And now look at the food he's provided for us. And he hasn't withheld his love from the dead. How does God show his love for the dead? By taking care of the widow the dead left behind. This man is a close relative of ours, one of our kinsman redeemers. Kinsman redeemer means he is responsible to help family members who are in need. Now, Ruth's growing list of blessings is not yet complete. In verse 21, she adds another one. Then Ruth, the Moabitess, said, furthermore, he said to me, with my young men, you should stay close until you finish my harvest. In other words, you can work for me all harvest season. You got a permanent job with me as long as until harvest is over, and stay among my young men for your safety. Now, notice verse 22. Naomi, a woman, is going to pick up on stay close to my young men. She's going to alter Boaz's instructions. But Naomi advised Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is prudent that you go out with his young women. In other words, Ruth, when you walk out the door, I want you to meet with his female employees. All of you all as women walk to the field of Boaz, work together. When work is over with, all of you leave and come home together, women with women, so you stay out of trouble and you're not exposed to sexual exploitation. She's speaking like a concerned mother, isn't she? And Naomi's motherly concern adjusts the advice that Boaz has given. Verse 23, so she stayed close to Boaz, women workers, in order to glean until the completion of the harvest of wheat. but she lived with her mother-in-law. Notice how proper everything is. She's not going to go and live with Boaz, a man that's not her husband. She's going to work for him, respect him. She'll go to work on his field. She'll come home with the women and stay with her mother-in-law. So why is all this happening to Ruth? Jesus put it this way, blessed are those who mourn. They shall be comforted. I like that. Naomi lost her husband. Naomi lost her 2 sons. She had no grandchildren. Ruth lost her husband. Ruth willingly lost everything behind to go with Naomi and take care with her. These 2 women have had their share of mourning. What's Jesus say? Now we don't usually think people who mourn are blessed. What an advantage that is. What Jesus is saying is, you go through difficulty and you're hurt and you mourn, God will make that up. And at some point, He's going to turn your mourning into rejoicing. Okay, we are out of time here. Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful story of your providence over your people. And that would be us. We are yours, just like Naomi and Ruth were. Our steps are ordered by you, and for that we are grateful. Now, may we learn to be generous with the needy, confident that you will recompense us for doing so. May we serve you and serve the needy, confident that that will please you and you will bless us in return. In Jesus' name, amen.